She had always been drawn to the sound of the piano. Ever since she was a little girl, the music seemed to flow through her fingers before she even understood the notes on a page. Every evening, after finishing her schoolwork and chores at home, she would sit by the old upright piano in the corner of her small living room. The keys were slightly worn, and the pedals creaked, but it did not matter to her. To her, this piano was more than an instrument. It was a friend, a confidant, and a teacher. She would practice for hours, sometimes losing track of time, absorbed in the melodies that she imagined and the emotions she wanted to share with the world. Music was her escape, her way of expressing herself when words felt insufficient. Her family supported her as best as they could. Her parents worked long hours, and they did not have much money for piano lessons or new instruments. Yet they never complained about her practice sessions that often went late into the night. Her father, tired from his long shifts, would sometimes sit quietly in the corner, listening to her play, and her mother would bring a warm cup of tea during a pause. They did not always understand the depth of her passion, but they loved her enough to encourage it. One morning, as she read the local newspaper while sipping her breakfast, she saw a headline that made her heart race. A famous pianist, known all over the country for his extraordinary skill and perfection, was coming to her city to give a masterclass and to scout for young talent. The opportunity was rare, almost impossible, but she knew this could be her chance to show her abilities to someone who truly understood music. She felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Could she really perform well enough to impress him? Was she ready to face such a challenge? She spent the next days preparing. Her practice became more focused and deliberate. She chose a piece that she had fallen in love with, one that challenged her but also allowed her to express her deepest feelings. Every day, she woke up early and practiced before school, stayed up after finishing homework, and sometimes, even at night, she would play softly so as not to disturb her sleeping family. Her fingers ached, her back grew sore, but she welcomed the discomfort because it meant she was growing. She recorded herself on her phone and listened critically, noting every mistake, every moment that lacked feeling, every note that could be improved. She wanted perfection, but more importantly, she wanted authenticity. The day of the audition arrived. She dressed carefully, choosing simple clothes that would not distract from her music, but still make her feel confident. Her heart pounded in her chest as she carried her music sheets and a small bag with essentials. The hall was larger than she had imagined, with rows of seats stretching out like a sea of faces, though most were empty for the private auditions. She could feel the weight of the occasion pressing on her. The famous pianist was seated at the front, his expression unreadable, a man who had seen countless performers in his life, most of whom failed to leave an impression. She stepped onto the small stage, the polished floor reflecting her nervous movements. She took a deep breath, glanced at the audience and the pianist, and then positioned her fingers over the keys. The first notes trembled slightly, betraying her anxiety, but soon the music began to flow. She poured her heart into each chord, letting her emotions speak louder than any technical flaw. The melody rose and fell, carrying with it her hopes, her fears, and her years of silent practice. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. She held her breath, waiting for the response. The pianist sat with a neutral expression, his eyes fixed on her, as if weighing every detail. Then he spoke, and the words hit her harder than she expected. He said her performance lacked precision and dismissed her as not yet ready. The word dismissed echoed in her mind, cold and absolute. She felt a knot in her stomach, a mixture of disappointment, shame, and frustration. Her hands shook as she stepped down from the stage. She wanted to argue, to explain, to show him that he had seen only a glimpse of her true potential, but the words stuck in her throat. Outside the hall, she sat on a bench, feeling the weight of failure pressing down on her. The sky was overcast, matching her mood. She wondered if all the hours of practice, all the sacrifices, were meaningless. The rejection stung more because it came from someone she had admired, someone whose opinion mattered so deeply. She thought about giving up, about turning away from the piano and leaving her dreams behind. But even as the thought crossed her mind, she felt a small spark of defiance. She could not let this one rejection define her. The walk home was long and quiet. She replayed the audition in her mind, analyzing every note, every moment, trying to understand where she went wrong. She realized that some technical mistakes could be corrected, and some nerves could be managed, but she also felt that her music needed to grow beyond technique. It needed to carry her soul in a way that could touch others. She promised herself that she would not stop. She would practice harder, study more, and find ways to express her music more authentically. At home, her parents noticed her somber mood. They did not need to ask. They could tell from her downcast eyes and quiet demeanor. Her mother offered a gentle hug, and her father simply sat beside her, letting her cry if she needed to. They did not have the words to fix her disappointment, but their presence provided comfort. Later, as she sat back at her piano, she began to play softly. The notes were tentative at first, a reflection of her wounded spirit, but slowly they gained confidence. She played not for anyone else, not for the famous pianist, but for herself. And in that moment, she remembered why she loved the piano, why she had dedicated so much of her life to it. It was not about approval or fame. It was about expression, passion, and resilience. Over the next few days, she continued to practice with renewed determination. She did not seek out more auditions immediately, nor did she dwell on the rejection. Instead, she focused on her growth, exploring new pieces, experimenting with different styles, and learning from every mistake. She sought advice from local teachers, listened to recordings of great musicians, and reflected on what made her own interpretations unique. The sting of being dismissed by the famous pianist remained, but it became a driving force rather than a barrier. She also began to notice small moments of encouragement around her. A neighbor complimented her on a melody she had played while walking past the window. A friend from school asked her to play at a small gathering, and the smiles and applause reminded her that music had the power to connect and inspire. These moments, though minor in comparison to the fame she aspired to, became meaningful threads that strengthened her resolve. By the end of the first week after the audition, she felt a quiet transformation. The rejection no longer felt like a final verdict but rather a challenge to grow. She understood that mastery would not come overnight, and recognition was not guaranteed, but her love for music remained unwavering. She found herself smiling more often at the piano, experimenting with compositions that reflected her personal story, and enjoying the journey rather than only the destination. Late one night, as she played a soft, gentle tune, she imagined herself performing again, not for the famous pianist, but for an audience that truly listened with their hearts. The vision filled her with hope. She realized that every note she played, every hour of practice, every setback she faced, was shaping her into a musician who could touch souls. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in days, she felt excitement instead of fear. Her life had not changed overnight, and the world outside remained the same. Yet within her, something had shifted. The dismissal, though painful, had ignited a spark. She had tasted failure, felt its sharp edge, and decided to continue despite it. The piano waited patiently in the corner of her room, its keys worn but welcoming, ready to carry her through the nights of practice, the challenges, and the triumphs that lay ahead. And as she played the last soft notes before sleep, she whispered to herself a quiet promise. One day, she would play a song that could not be ignored, a song that would speak louder than rejection, a song that could change everything. The days after the audition passed slowly. She woke up every morning with a quiet determination, ready to face her piano as if each key held a secret she had yet to uncover. The memory of the famous pianist's dismissive words still lingered, sharp and uncomfortable, but instead of breaking her, it pushed her forward. She decided that the rejection would not define her. She would work harder, study more, and find her own way of expressing the music inside her. She began by going back to the basics. Every morning, she played scales, arpeggios, and exercises she had once considered tedious. She realized that technical mastery was just as important as emotion and expression. Hours were spent on perfecting her finger positioning, her timing, and her dynamics. Each mistake became a lesson rather than a setback. She recorded her practice sessions and listened carefully, noting small imperfections and moments where she could play with more feeling. Progress was slow, but she started to notice subtle changes. Her hands moved more confidently, her playing sounded smoother, and her musical ideas felt clearer. Her home was not a quiet or easy place to practice. There were interruptions from family members, phone calls, and household chores that demanded attention. She learned to carve out her own time, often waking up before dawn or staying up late after everyone else slept. Her dedication surprised even her parents, who began to understand the depth of her commitment. They quietly supported her, providing encouragement and small comforts like extra tea or a warm blanket by the piano. Though their words were simple, they carried the weight of love and understanding that she needed. She also sought guidance outside her home. A local music teacher agreed to help her for a small fee, impressed by her determination. These lessons became invaluable. The teacher provided insight into musical phrasing, expression, and the subtle techniques that made a performance compelling. She learned to connect each note with emotion, to listen to the spaces between notes as carefully as the sounds themselves. It was not easy. At times, she felt frustrated and doubted her progress, but each small improvement built her confidence. As she practiced and studied, she began experimenting with her own style. She took familiar pieces and tried different interpretations, exploring tempos, dynamics, and phrasing that felt natural to her. She discovered that music could carry her own story, her joys and sorrows, in ways that no words could. The piano became a mirror of her inner life, reflecting her emotions and aspirations. Sometimes, she would play for hours without noticing the time, lost in the melodies she created and the feelings they evoked. Life outside her music was not always kind. Some friends and acquaintances dismissed her ambitions as unrealistic, unable to understand why she dedicated so much of her life to something that seemed impractical. Occasionally, she overheard comments about her chances of success or her chances of being recognized by the world. These words stung, but she used them as fuel rather than allowing them to deter her. She reminded herself that her journey was not about pleasing others, but about fulfilling her own passion. There were moments of small triumphs along the way. A neighbor complimented a tune she had played softly through an open window. A friend asked her to perform at a small gathering, and though it was informal, she felt the warmth of genuine appreciation from the audience. These moments reminded her that music had power beyond awards or recognition. Connected people, moved emotions, and gave joy. She began to understand that her path was not defined by a single audition or a single person's opinion, but by the sum of every note she played and every effort she made to grow. One afternoon, she decided to attend a local concert, a performance by talented musicians from nearby schools. She observed carefully, taking notes on posture, hand movements, and stage presence. She admired the performer's confidence and tried to imagine herself on that stage one day, not as a dream but as a goal within reach. After the concert, she returned home inspired and energized, ready to continue her own practice with renewed focus. She also began exploring different musical genres. While she loved classical pieces, she found inspiration in jazz, contemporary, and traditional music from her culture. Each style offered new techniques and emotions to explore. She played melodies she had never tried before, experimenting with rhythm, phrasing, and improvisation. This exploration broadened her understanding of music and helped her develop a unique voice. She realized that her strength lay not in mimicking others but in combining her skills with her own creativity. Despite her progress, there were still moments of doubt. She sometimes compared herself to other musicians, imagining their skill and feeling inadequate. The memory of the famous pianist's rejection returned, sharp and discouraging. During these moments, she would step away from the piano, take long walks, and reflect on why she played in the first place. She reminded herself that music was her language, her way of expressing feelings too deep for words. She could not allow fear or self-doubt to steal her joy. To keep herself motivated, she set small goals. She aimed to master a particular piece, to perform for a small audience, or to improve a technical skill each week. Each goal accomplished, no matter how small, gave her confidence and a sense of progress. She celebrated these victories quietly, often with a soft smile at the piano or a whispered word of encouragement to herself. It was a slow and steady journey, but it was hers, and she cherished it. Her family noticed the change in her demeanor. She seemed calmer, more focused, and more self-assured. Her parents quietly admired her resilience and dedication, realizing that the piano was shaping not only her skills, but her character. She was learning patience, perseverance, and the value of hard work. The lessons she gained from her daily practice extended beyond music and touched every aspect of her life. One evening, she was asked to play at a small community event, a gathering of neighbors and friends. She hesitated at first, worried about her nerves and potential mistakes. But she remembered all the hours of practice, the lessons learned, and the small victories that had brought her to this point. She played with feeling, letting the music carry her story to the listeners. The audience responded warmly, clapping and smiling, and she felt a surge of pride and happiness. It was a reminder that her music could touch people's hearts, even if it did not yet reach the world stage. With each passing day, her confidence grew. She practiced with purpose, explored her musicality, and embraced challenges as opportunities to improve. The memory of being rejected by the famous pianist became less of a wound and more of a lesson. She realized that one person's opinion could not define her worth or her potential. Instead, she focused on what she could control: her effort, her growth, and her dedication to her art. She also began to understand the importance of patience. Success did not come overnight, and recognition might take years. She learned to value the journey, the small steps, and the quiet moments of improvement. She found joy in discovery, in the subtle beauty of each note, and in the connection she felt with her instrument. The piano was no longer just a tool. It had become an extension of herself, a partner in her journey, and a source of constant inspiration. By the end of this period, she felt stronger and more prepared than ever. She had faced rejection, struggled with doubt, and worked tirelessly to improve her craft. She knew that more challenges awaited, but she also knew she had the resilience to face them. The music within her had grown richer, more expressive, and more personal. She had discovered not just her technical abilities, but her own voice as a musician. Late at night, after everyone had gone to bed, she sat at her piano and played a piece she had composed herself. The melody was soft and gentle, yet full of emotion and determination. As her fingers moved over the keys, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She knew that her journey was just beginning, and that the world would not yet see her full potential. But she also knew that she was ready to continue, to face new challenges, and to embrace the opportunities that awaited. The rejection from the famous pianist was no longer a barrier, but a stepping stone on her path toward greatness. She played on, letting her music tell the story of her struggle, her growth, and her unwavering passion. Spring had come, bringing with it longer days and a soft warmth in the air. She continued to practice each day, but now her music carried a new confidence. She had grown in her skill and understanding, yet she still yearned for a chance to share her talent with more than just her family and neighbors. One afternoon, she decided to attend a small local music gathering held at a community hall nearby. It was informal, with young musicians taking turns playing pieces they had prepared. She had never performed in such an open setting before, and the thought of playing for strangers made her heart race. She arrived early, carrying her sheet music and a small notebook filled with ideas for compositions. The hall was modest, with wooden floors and simple chairs, but it felt alive with the presence of people who loved music. As she settled in, she listened attentively to the other performers. Some played with precision, others with feeling, but all had their own stories and styles. She took mental notes, observing their stage presence, hand movements, and how they interacted with their instruments. Every detail seemed important, as if the hall itself were a classroom for her growth. When her turn came, she walked to the piano and took a deep breath. The room was quiet, all eyes on her, and for a moment, fear crept in. But she reminded herself of the months she had spent preparing, of the lessons learned from practice, and the journey she had undertaken since being rejected. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The first notes were cautious, but soon the music began to flow naturally. She allowed herself to express her emotions freely, letting the melodies carry her story. The audience responded softly at first, nodding, leaning in, and then with smiles and quiet murmurs of appreciation. Her heart lifted with each note. After she finished, a woman approached her, smiling warmly. She was a local music teacher who occasionally organized events in the community. She complimented her playing, noting the emotion in her music and the clarity of her technique. She mentioned that she knew people who organized larger performances and suggested she consider participating. The encounter, though brief, sparked a sense of possibility. For the first time, she felt that her talent could reach beyond her small circle. The encouragement from someone experienced in the music world filled her with hope and excitement. In the following weeks, she continued to practice diligently, now incorporating the new insights she had gained from watching other performers and from the teacher's advice. She explored new pieces, experimented with improvisation, and refined her existing repertoire. She also began to share her music more openly, playing for neighbors, friends, and at small community gatherings. Each performance, however modest, gave her confidence and experience, and she began to notice a subtle change in the way she played. A more natural flow, a greater connection to the music and the audience. One day, while she was playing a quiet melody in a small park near her home, a man stopped to listen. He was older, with kind eyes and a gentle smile, and he introduced himself as someone who helped organize concerts and music events in the city. He listened to her for a while without interrupting, and when she finished, he applauded quietly. He praised her style, noting the emotion and authenticity in her playing. He asked if she would be interested in performing at a larger local concert, an opportunity that could bring her music to more people. Her excitement was tempered by nerves, but she agreed, realizing that this could be a significant step forward. In the days leading up to the concert, she practiced with renewed focus. She wanted to present herself confidently and share the music that had become such a part of her life. She spent hours rehearsing each piece, refining every note, and imagining how it would feel to perform in front of a larger audience. Her parents, noticing her determination, gave her space and encouragement, quietly supporting her without intrusion. The balance of guidance and independence allowed her to grow, to take ownership of her journey and her music. The day of the concert arrived, and she felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The hall was larger than any she had performed in before, with rows of chairs stretching out before her and the murmurs of an expectant audience. She carried her sheet music and took a deep breath, reminding herself of everything she had learned and experienced since her first rejection. She was no longer the nervous girl who had been dismissed. She was a musician with purpose, passion, and a story to tell through her music. When she began to play, she felt the familiar connection with the piano, the flow of music carrying her through each passage. The notes seemed to speak for her, expressing feelings she could not put into words. The audience listened intently, some closing their eyes, others leaning forward, drawn in by the emotion and sincerity of her performance. With each note, her confidence grew, and by the time she reached the final chord, she felt a sense of fulfillment unlike any she had experienced before. Afterward, the applause was warm and enthusiastic. She received compliments from the organizer, fellow musicians, and audience members. Many were impressed by her skill, her expression, and the unique way she interpreted each piece. She realized that performing in front of a receptive audience, sharing her music openly, brought a joy that was different from solitary practice. It was a connection, a dialogue between her and the listeners, and it reinforced why she had chosen this path. In the following days, she was approached by several people who expressed interest in her music and asked about future performances. She felt a mix of pride and humility, recognizing that her efforts were beginning to bear fruit. She also reflected on how far she had come since that moment of rejection by the famous pianist. She understood that her growth was not only about skill, but also about courage, resilience, and the willingness to put herself forward despite fear. She continued to practice and refine her craft, now with more purpose and direction. She experimented with combining different musical styles, adding personal touches to each piece, and exploring her own creativity. She composed short pieces that reflected her life experiences and emotions, realizing that music could tell her story in a way words could not. Each composition, each performance, became a step toward discovering her own voice, distinct from anyone else's. One afternoon, while reviewing her compositions, she received an unexpected message from the older man who had first noticed her in the park. He mentioned an opportunity to participate in a regional music competition that attracted young musicians from across the area. The competition would be judged by several prominent figures in the music world, including, perhaps, people whose opinion could shape her future. She felt a surge of excitement mixed with nervousness. The memory of being rejected still lingered, but she now understood that such experiences were part of the journey rather than the end of it. She began preparing for the competition with renewed determination. She analyzed her past performances, refined her pieces, and practiced with a focus that combined technical skill with emotional depth. She sought advice from her teacher and mentors, incorporating their insights while staying true to her own style. She also practiced performing in front of small groups, learning to manage nerves and engage with the audience. Each practice session brought her closer to the level of confidence she needed for the competition. During this time, she also reflected on the importance of persistence and resilience. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that she would face challenges, mistakes, and moments of doubt. But she had learned to embrace these experiences, seeing them as opportunities to grow rather than obstacles. She found strength in her passion for music, in the joy it brought her, and in the connections she made through it. Finally, the day of the competition arrived. She felt the familiar mix of excitement and anxiety, but she reminded herself that she had prepared as best as she could. The hall was filled with young musicians, teachers, and music lovers, all eager to witness the performances. When it was her turn, she walked to the piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. The music flowed naturally, each note carrying her emotions and story. She could feel the audience responding, their attention focused, their appreciation growing with each passage. By the time she finished, she knew she had given her best performance. The applause that followed was heartfelt and encouraging. She felt a surge of pride and satisfaction, not from the judgment of others, but from knowing she had expressed herself fully and authentically. She realized that the journey, the preparation, and the courage to perform had already brought her a sense of accomplishment and growth. The competition was not only a test of skill but also a celebration of her dedication and resilience. As she left the stage, she felt a quiet excitement about what lay ahead. She had faced rejection, worked tirelessly, and discovered her own voice in music. The encounter at the park and the performances that followed had opened doors she had only dreamed of before. She understood that the path would continue to have challenges, but she was ready to embrace them with determination and passion. Music had become not only her skill but also her identity, her language, and her purpose. Months passed, and she continued to grow in both skill and confidence. The local concerts and competitions had strengthened her, giving her experience performing under pressure and connecting with audiences. Yet, she longed for something bigger, a stage that could truly test her ability and show the world what she had become. She spent countless hours preparing a piece that was deeply personal, one that had taken shape through all her struggles, practice, and experiments. Every note was chosen carefully, every phrase designed to express her story. The opportunity came unexpectedly. A prestigious regional music event was being held in the city, featuring talented musicians from across the country. The competition was tough, and the judges included renowned performers and teachers. It was a chance to be recognized on a larger scale, and she knew it could change her path if she performed well. When she learned that she could participate, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She remembered the famous pianist who had once dismissed her, and although the memory stung, it now motivated her rather than discouraging her. She arrived at the venue early, her sheet music and personal notes carefully organized. The hall was grand, with polished floors, bright lights, and rows of seats stretching far back. She could feel the weight of the occasion pressing on her, but she reminded herself that she had prepared for this moment for years. The other competitors were skilled, each carrying an aura of confidence and talent. She observed them quietly, learning what she could from their demeanor and approach without letting comparison shake her own confidence. When her turn came, she walked to the piano and took a deep breath. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, but soon she found her rhythm and flow. Each chord carried her emotion. Every melody reflected her journey, and her unique interpretation began to unfold. She played with the precision she had honed through months of practice, but also with a depth of feeling that could not be taught. The music spoke directly from her heart to the audience. As she continued, she noticed how the listeners responded. Some closed their eyes, some leaned forward, and a few whispered to each other, clearly moved by her performance. She did not play for their approval, but it was encouraging to feel the connection. The music seemed to grow stronger with her confidence, and by the time she reached the climax of her piece, she felt fully immersed in the moment. The hall was silent except for the sound of the piano, and in that silence, she felt a sense of accomplishment and freedom she had never experienced before. When the final note rang out, there was a moment of stillness. Then the applause began, gentle at first, then swelling into a thunderous response. She looked up to see the faces of the audience, many of them smiling, some standing, all showing admiration and respect. Her heart soared, and a deep sense of joy filled her. She had given her all, and it had been recognized not only by her peers but also by the audience that mattered. People who loved music and could feel the honesty in her performance. After the performance, the judges spoke to her individually. They praised her technical skill, her musical expression, and the maturity of her interpretation. One judge mentioned that her performance had a rare quality, a combination of talent, dedication, and soul that could not be taught. She felt proud, but also humble, understanding that her journey was still ongoing, and that this was one milestone among many. Then, unexpectedly, she noticed a familiar figure entering the hall. The famous pianist who had dismissed her months ago was present, observing quietly from the back. Her heart skipped a beat. She wondered if he would recognize her, or if he even remembered her at all. She tried to focus on the music, but a mixture of anticipation and anxiety coursed through her. When she finished and turned toward the audience, she caught his eye. He nodded slightly, a subtle acknowledgement that seemed to carry both surprise and respect. In the following moments, she received invitations to speak with organizers and other musicians. People were interested in her story and her music, eager to hear about her approach and experiences. The famous pianist approached her finally, offering words of praise. He admitted that he had underestimated her talent before, and that her growth and unique expression had truly impressed him. The acknowledgement, though unexpected, felt like validation of all the effort, struggle, and perseverance she had poured into her music. The experience transformed her confidence. She realized that rejection was not a reflection of her worth, but a step in her journey. She had faced challenges, learned from mistakes, and continued to grow, and now she could see the results of her dedication. The piano had become not just an instrument, but a companion that had guided her through hardship, nurtured her creativity, and helped her find her own voice. Over the next weeks, her life became filled with new opportunities. She was invited to perform at various events, both locally and regionally. Each performance added to her experience and confidence, and she began to feel comfortable sharing her music openly, without fear of judgment. She also took time to mentor younger musicians, understanding the importance of encouragement and guidance. She shared not only her technical knowledge but also the lessons she had learned about persistence, resilience, and the power of expressing oneself honestly through music. Her compositions also evolved. She began creating longer pieces that told stories, blending different musical styles, and incorporating her personal experiences. Each composition was a reflection of her journey, a musical diary that captured her emotions, struggles, and triumphs. She found that composing added a new dimension to her talent, allowing her to connect even more deeply with her music and audiences. People who listened to her original works were often moved by the sincerity and depth of expression. Despite all the recognition, she remained grounded. She continued to practice diligently, knowing that talent alone was not enough. She studied new techniques, analyzed performances of other great musicians, and sought to continually improve. She understood that the journey of a musician was lifelong, and that each day offered a chance to learn and grow. Her focus was not on fame or accolades, but on the joy of creating, performing, and sharing music. One evening, after a particularly moving performance at a regional event, she sat alone at her piano, reflecting on her journey. She remembered the early days, the long hours of practice, the moments of self-doubt, and the sting of being rejected by someone she admired. She realized that every experience, whether painful or joyous, had shaped her into the musician she had become. The piano had been a witness to her growth, a partner in her journey, and a source of endless inspiration. She also recognized the importance of connection. Music had allowed her to communicate in ways words could not. She could share feelings, tell stories, and move people simply through sound. The bond she felt with the piano, the audience, and even the famous pianist who had once dismissed her, created a sense of fulfillment that went beyond personal achievement. She understood that music was not just about performance, but about expression, communication, and the shared human experience. In the weeks that followed, she continued to receive invitations to perform at concerts, festivals, and special events. Her reputation as a talented and expressive pianist grew, but she remained focused on the craft itself rather than the recognition. Each performance was an opportunity to connect with the music and the audience, to explore new interpretations, and to refine her skills. She embraced every opportunity with gratitude and dedication. Through this journey, she learned valuable lessons about resilience, patience, and self-belief. She realized that rejection and failure were not endpoints but stepping stones. They were moments that tested her resolve, encouraged reflection, and ultimately guided her toward growth. She understood that perseverance, combined with passion and dedication, could lead to transformation and unexpected opportunities. Late one night, she sat quietly by her piano, playing a piece she had composed during her early struggles. The melody was soft and contemplative, yet it carried a sense of triumph and hope. She reflected on how far she had come, from the young pianist who had been dismissed to a confident musician whose music could touch hearts. The journey was ongoing, but she felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Her passion for music remained as strong as ever, fueled by experience, growth, and the realization that her talent could truly make a difference. She played on, knowing that one song, carefully crafted and deeply felt, had the power to change everything. The recognition she had gained from the regional competition opened doors she had only dreamed of before. Invitations to perform came from cities near and far, and her schedule began to fill with concerts, recitals, and community events. She felt a mix of excitement and responsibility, knowing that each performance was a chance to share her music, connect with audiences, and continue growing as a musician. Despite the new attention, she remained grounded, understanding that her journey was about passion, dedication, and connection rather than fame. Her parents continued to support her quietly, proud of her accomplishments but careful not to let the praise change her. They had watched her transform from a timid, nervous girl into a confident young musician, and they cherished her resilience and love for music. Even with a busy performance schedule, she made time for practice, often staying up late into the night, refining her pieces, and exploring new ideas. She understood that talent alone was not enough. It required continuous effort, reflection, and growth. One day, she was approached by the organizers of a prestigious music festival that celebrated rising talents from around the country. They invited her to perform in front of a large audience, including critics, teachers, and musicians she had admired from afar. The opportunity was thrilling but intimidating. She remembered the early days, the rejection from the famous pianist, and the long months of practice and perseverance that had brought her to this point. She felt both nervous and determined, knowing that this performance could mark another turning point in her journey. In the days leading up to the festival, she immersed herself in preparation. She selected pieces that reflected her technical abilities, emotional depth, and personal style. She rehearsed tirelessly, analyzing each note, each phrase, and every nuance of her playing. She sought feedback from mentors, considered suggestions carefully, and incorporated them while staying true to her own interpretation. The process was demanding, but it strengthened her confidence and allowed her to express herself more fully through her music. The day of the festival arrived, and the hall was larger and more formal than any she had played in before. The seats were filled with people eager to witness the performances, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. She carried her sheet music and personal notes, her hands slightly trembling with a mix of excitement and nerves. As she walked onto the stage, she took a deep breath, remembering the journey that had brought her here. She reminded herself that she was not defined by past rejections, but by the dedication, passion, and growth she had cultivated over the years. When she began to play, the music flowed naturally. Every note, every chord, carried her emotions, her experiences, and her unique voice as a musician. The audience was captivated, some leaning forward in their seats, others closing their eyes, absorbed in the melodies that seemed to speak directly to their hearts. She felt a profound connection with the listeners, a reminder that music was not just sound but a bridge between souls. Her fingers moved with precision and confidence, guided by years of practice and a deep understanding of the music she played. As she reached the climax of her performance, she felt a surge of exhilaration. The piece she had chosen was one she had composed herself, a reflection of her journey, struggles, and triumphs. Each note carried the weight of countless hours of practice, moments of doubt, and small victories that had led her here. The music seemed to fill the hall with emotion, creating a shared experience between her and the audience. When she played the final chord, the silence that followed was profound, as if the room held its breath in awe of the expression she had achieved. The applause that followed was overwhelming. The audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, moved by the depth and authenticity of her performance. She felt a sense of fulfillment and pride, knowing that her music had reached them in a meaningful way. Among the listeners, she noticed familiar faces, mentors, friends, and even the famous pianist who had once dismissed her. Their expressions reflected admiration, respect, and acknowledgement of the growth and dedication she had shown. She realized that this moment was a culmination of her journey, a testament to resilience, passion, and perseverance. After the performance, she was approached by the festival organizers and fellow musicians. They praised her technical skill, musicality, and the emotional depth of her performance. Several people expressed interest in collaborating with her or inviting her to perform at other events. She felt a mix of pride and humility, understanding that recognition was not an endpoint, but a step in her ongoing journey as a musician. She had learned that success was not only about talent, but also about dedication, resilience, and the ability to connect with others through music. The famous pianist, who had once dismissed her, approached her privately. He smiled warmly and complimented her growth, noting the maturity and authenticity of her music. He admitted that he had underestimated her potential, and that her performance had left a lasting impression. She felt a mixture of surprise, gratitude, and closure. The acknowledgement, though unexpected, was a powerful reminder that persistence and dedication could transform rejection into opportunity. She thanked him quietly, recognizing the significance of the moment and the journey that had led her to it. In the following months, her career continued to develop. She received invitations to perform at concerts, festivals, and special events across the country. She began composing more original pieces, exploring new styles and emotions, and sharing her music with wider audiences. Each performance was an opportunity to express herself, connect with listeners, and continue learning. She remained committed to practice, reflection, and growth, understanding that her journey as a musician was ongoing, and that each day offered new lessons. Despite the recognition and opportunities, she remained humble and focused. She continued to value the process of learning and growing, finding joy in the small moments of improvement and the emotional connection her music could create. She mentored younger musicians, sharing her experiences, encouraging resilience, and inspiring them to pursue their own passions. She understood the importance of giving back, of nurturing the next generation of musicians, and of contributing to a community built on dedication, expression, and shared love for music. One evening, after returning from a performance in a distant city, she sat alone at her piano. The room was quiet, filled only with the soft glow of a lamp and the gentle hum of her thoughts. She reflected on her journey, from the early days of practice, the sting of rejection, the small victories, and the gradual growth that had led her here. She thought about the people who had supported her along the way, the mentors who had guided her, the audiences who had listened, and even the famous pianist who had once dismissed her. Each encounter, each experience, had shaped her into the musician she had become. She began to play a piece she had composed during her first months of serious practice. The notes were soft and tentative at first, but as she progressed, they grew in confidence and expression. The music carried her story, her struggles, her perseverance, and her triumphs. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment and gratitude, knowing that the journey itself had been as important as the recognition and success she now enjoyed. The piano had been her companion, her teacher, and her friend, guiding her through each challenge and helping her discover her own voice. As she played, she imagined the audience she had dreamed of performing for in the beginning. People who could feel the emotions behind the music, who could connect with her story, and who could be inspired by her journey. She realized that music had the power to change lives, not just through performance but through the message of persistence, dedication, and self-expression it carried. Each note she played was a reminder that challenges could be overcome, that rejection could be transformed into opportunity, and that passion and perseverance could lead to growth and fulfillment. She finished the piece and sat quietly, her hands resting on the keys. The silence in the room was comforting, a moment of reflection and gratitude. She thought about the path she had traveled, the people she had met, the lessons she had learned, and the music she had created. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that there would always be new challenges, new opportunities, and new music to explore. Yet, she also knew that she had reached a point of confidence, fulfillment, and self-discovery that would guide her forward. In the weeks that followed, she continued to perform, compose, and grow as a musician. She embraced each opportunity with dedication and joy, knowing that her journey was shaped not only by talent, but by resilience, passion, and the ability to connect with others through music. She remained humble and focused, appreciating the experiences that had shaped her and the people who had supported her. Her music became a reflection of her journey, a testament to perseverance, growth, and the power of expressing oneself authentically. One afternoon, as she prepared for another performance, she paused and reflected on the phrase that had once filled her with doubt, the dismissal from the famous pianist. She realized that it no longer held power over her. Instead, it had become a source of motivation, a reminder of the journey she had undertaken, the effort she had invested, and the growth she had achieved. She smiled, understanding that her passion for music, combined with dedication and resilience, had transformed that rejection into a stepping stone toward success. When she performed that day, the audience responded with warmth and admiration. She felt a sense of completeness and satisfaction, knowing that her music had reached them and that she had shared her story authentically. The piano, once a tool for practice and expression, had become a bridge between herself and the world, a medium through which she could inspire, connect, and communicate in ways that words alone could not convey. As the performance concluded, she looked around the hall and felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had traveled a long and challenging path, yet she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more connected to her passion than ever before. The journey had been as important as the destination, and she understood that her music, her perseverance, and her dedication would continue to guide her toward new experiences, opportunities, and fulfillment. Sitting quietly at her piano after the audience had left, she reflected on her journey. She thought about the rejection that had once felt devastating, the challenges she had faced, the mentors and supporters who had guided her, and the small victories that had built her confidence. She realized that every experience had contributed to her growth, her skill, and her ability to express herself authentically. The piano had been a constant companion, a teacher, and a source of inspiration throughout her journey. She began to play once more, letting her fingers move freely over the keys. The music was rich, expressive, and filled with emotion, a reflection of her journey and the person she had become. She understood that her story, her perseverance, and her music could inspire others to pursue their passions, face challenges with courage, and transform setbacks into opportunities. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had embraced her path fully and had grown into the musician and person she had always aspired to be. As the final notes faded, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She knew that the journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had reached a point of confidence, growth, and self-discovery that would guide her forward. The famous pianist's dismissal, once a source of doubt, had become a reminder of the power of resilience, dedication, and passion. She smiled softly, understanding that her music, her journey, and her experiences had the power to change everything, not only for herself but for everyone who listened.